in front of your kids. No! Bad apples are good for something. When you're 16 and then run.
So you've been in Los Angeles for 3 days. Tell me, what do you think about Los Angeles?
But what part? It's really different.
Yeah?
In all parts. And we're really busy doing our fundraiser for our media outlet, Media Zona in Russia. So we came completely exhausted. So we slept for the first day, and then for 2 days we were rehearsing. So I kind of told you a lot, but I guess you can tell me more about Los Angeles if you feel like it.
No. So right now in United States, there's a big, what they call Red Scare happening, right? So it's being pushed by the establishment, by the corporate news media, and everybody's hair's on fire that somehow Russia's been hacking our elections and our democracy, and that they're a big bad enemy again. Now, there's a small group of people in the United States who see through that propaganda. What does it look like to people outside of the country? What do people in Russia think about what's happening now?
We think that we don't really like when we hear on the news that Trump is meddling with Russia or with Russians, because we're aware that Russia is much more diverse than just is being portrayed in most of Western media.
Right.
Sometimes it really hurts because I am Russian and I am part of Russia, and not all Russians do support Putin, and not all Russians support his actions, and that's the reason why we are speaking out.
Yeah. So, what would you say? I mean, how would you say the average Russian person, if there is such a thing, what's their view of what's happening in America? And do they think it's a good thing that Trump and Putin are friendly, or do they think it's a bad thing, or do they think we're being ridiculous by being afraid of Russia?
There is no such thing as average Russian person, because there is no such thing as average American person, and I'm against even such a phrase, because what we're fighting for the diversity, and no, real democracy is when you can be in minority but you still have your voice and you're not being shut down for it. So if you're talking about our circles, if you're talking about our community, which maybe is not majority in Russia, we don't know really, because we don't have honest polls in Russia, and lots of people just are afraid to really speak out and share their opinions. It's like more or less like in Soviet times when people sharing their opinions in the kitchen, but they don't want to say these opinions publicly. So you cannot even find out what average Russian person really thinks. But if you're talking about our circles, it's quite funny for us that Western media are portraying Putin to be so powerful and so effective, and which is not exactly true, because he's having problems even with running his own country, and he's famously ineffective and corrupted person, and in a vertical of power, we call it vertical of power, doesn't really help anybody to deal with local problems, and everything that Putin decides, he decides by himself or a small group of people that surround him. So it doesn't really make them super effective. And so it's quite irritating for us to see Putin on the cover of magazines, like being this super powerful, macho, strong man, because that's exactly what he wants. And this attitude of let's say liberal mainstream media, Western media, just encourage him to behave in this way, and he feels empowered by all these Time magazine covers.
So just like in the United States, more than half the people who voted didn't even vote for our president, which is hilarious. By the way,
you have an interesting system.
Yeah, so what do you think of that system where the more the people, because if that happened, I know what we would say if Russia did it that way and Putin got less votes than his opponent, we would be screaming bloody murder. How do you feel about it? What is your opinion on that?
I feel that it's quite an old system, and it doesn't really represent our times when we have much more convenient ways to count votes. And I'm not a big fan of current way of representative democracy. I wanna see more direct democracy, and electoral college is the it's a move back from direct democracy, even if you compare it with like normal representative democracy, if you can say about such thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not a big fan. Yeah,
I'm not a big fan.
I'm not a big fan of Hillary Clinton as well, but
Me neither.
I would.
So
I was
a lot of
supporter of
people-
Bernie Sanders. So
Oh, me too. So now a lot of people call me a radical, right? Even though I don't look like a radical, right? But this
you don't have to look like a radical to be a radical.
it turns out, right? Because I wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton, the corporatist warmonger that she is, and I couldn't do that anymore. And they keep giving us a bigger monster on the right to make us go towards the wolf, right? And so I didn't want to do that anymore. So I voted for Jill Stein, the environmentalist, and people call me a radical. And so you're also called a radical, right? Would you consider me a radical as opposed to like, you're a real radical. You went to prison, you speak out, you actually risk. All I did was not vote for somebody. So you're a real radical.
I was studying philosophy for 5 years, and what I learned that I'm not the biggest fan of definitions and giving definitions because everybody has their own definitions, and if you feel empowered by people calling you radical, I think you should believe in it, and you should be even more radical if you feel like it. It's like it warms your heart and makes you stand up for your beliefs. Regarding Jill Stein, I think the whole. For me, I'm not American, so I cannot teach you how to live. I cannot preach, but it just seems to me that system that has just two parties is quite awkward because it kind of really represents what people think, and the way how European democracy works is it's not ideal, but it's much more. It looks just like more like real democracy when you have lots of small parties like Green Party and Animal Party and Pirate Party, and people can really decide who can represent them. And when Americans are really known for talking a lot about competition, but it's not really competitive. Like it's not real competition when they have just two parties and they're moving all the time to the right, and you're normalizing things that I would consider corruption. That's called here lobbyism.
Yes, that's just another word for corruption, of course, or a political donation. That's just another form. You're right, 100% correct. A lot of people are turning away from capitalism, a lot of younger people. How do you feel about capitalism?
I feel like we've been trapped in TINA syndrome too much. This famous phrase of Margaret Thatcher that there is no alternative, and since Soviet Union collapsed, it felt for a lot of people like it's really the end of history, like Francis Fukuyama said. But it's not really. We still have to look for alternatives. We still have to use our political imagination and really dream about a world where we want to live, and there is an alternative. And I see that lots of people, especially young people, are looking for this alternative. We don't have all the time. We don't have all answers, but at least we have these questions, and it's really important to ask these questions, and it's really important to question status quo. And it happens in America. People are supporting Bernie Sanders. It happens in the UK. People supporting Jeremy Corbyn, and even in Russia, Alexei Navalny, who is, I would say, the main, the leader of Russian opposition. Not elected leader, but I would say he's the most effective player, and I can really trust him. Though we do have political differences, but I can see that he's moving more towards social democratic beliefs, and he started as a liberal, and I think he's feeling it in the air, and he's feeling that even Russian people are starting to think more and more about social issues.
So a lot of people feel like in Spain they had a mini revolution that got pushed down, and a lot of people are calling for revolution, including here in the United States. I'm calling for a revolution. You wrote a book with that title, How to Start a Revolution. How do we start a revolution?
Think, dream, imagine alternative world where you want to live in, and act, organize, and listen to people around you. Don't look just in your cell phone. Don't look just in your social network that doesn't really represent all people who are living around you. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your community, and try to understand each other and figure out a way.
Okay. Well, listen, thanks for talking with us. I really appreciate you taking time.
Thank you.
Okay.